In Alaska, hundreds have vanished in ways so baffling and final. Even seasoned investigators admit defeat. But tales about cases the FBI won't go near have roots in something colder than conspiracy. The true barrier here is not refusal, but a wilderness that buries evidence faster than any search can begin. When the weather shifts and the landscape erases all trace, jurisdiction means little. Every missing person leaves a question that endures for decades. What is it about this place that turns fact into legend? And which of Alaska's unsolved mysteries could be explained if anyone ever reached the end of the trail? The phrase Alaska Triangle first appeared in print during the early 1970s, gaining traction after a string of high-profile disappearances. Magazine articles and newspaper columns used the term to capture the public's imagination, mapping a rough triangle between Anchorage, Juneau, and the far north. The idea spread quickly, fueled by headlines and radio chatter, but it never appeared in official agency records or search reports. No government body has ever recognized the Alaska Triangle as a real phenomenon, only as a label that stuck. Its rise paralleled a wave of interest in the Bermuda Triangle, with writers drawing comparisons between Alaska's vast, unforgiving wilderness and the mysteries of the open ocean. Over time, the label became shorthand for vanishing planes, lost hikers, and unexplained events. Beneath the catchy name, the facts point to something more ordinary, a region defined by distance, weather, and the limits of human reach. The gap between myth and reality starts here, where a headline becomes a legend, and legends rarely match the evidence. Official records from Alaska state troopers and search and rescue databases reveal a stark pattern. Aviation incidents account for the largest share of disappearances in the state. 1 in 5 unresolved cases involves a missing aircraft, often lost without a trace in remote corridors or over open water. Exposure to the elements is the next leading cause. Hikers and hunters succumb to hypothermia or vanish into vast stretches of tundra and forest. Water-related incidents, including boating mishaps, river crossings, and coastal accidents, follow closely, claiming dozens of lives each year. Search windows are short. 90% of wilderness recoveries happen within the first 2 days. After that, snow, ice, and shifting tides erase clues. Alaska's rate of missing persons is more than double the national average, a statistic driven by rugged terrain, unpredictable weather, and limited infrastructure. Cell coverage drops below 50% outside major towns, and rescue operations are often delayed by storms or darkness. In this environment, even a simple misstep can become a permanent mystery. At 8:55 in the morning on October 16, 1972, a twin-engine Cessna 310 lifted off from Anchorage, bound for Juneau. On board were 4 people: pilot Don Johns, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, and aide Russell Brown. The weather was already turning. Low clouds and gusting winds swept the flight path south over the Gulf of Alaska. The last radio transmission came just minutes after departure, near Hagemeister Island. It was routine, no distress. Then silence. What followed was the largest search and rescue operation in American peacetime history. Over the next 39 days, the United States military and civilian volunteers organized a grid that stretched across 127,000 square miles, an area larger than the state of New Mexico. 40 military aircraft and 50 civilian planes joined the hunt, along with dozens of ships and hundreds of ground teams. They combed mountain passes, coastal forests, and open water. Some days, whiteout conditions grounded the entire fleet. Other days, pilots risked their lives flying low over glaciers and fjords, hoping for a glint of wreckage. Not a single confirmed piece of the aircraft was ever found. No wreckage. Investigators reviewed maintenance logs and weather briefings. The Cessna's de-icing system had been flagged as unreliable just days before, yet the flight went ahead. The pilot filed an instrument flight plan, but skipped a full weather briefing. In the end, official reports listed no probable cause. Theories point to icing, mechanical failure, or a sudden downdraft over the mountains. But with no wreckage, every answer remains speculation. The loss of two sitting members of Congress and their aide left a permanent gap in the political landscape, and a mystery that Alaska's wilderness still keeps unsolved. On the night of January 26, 1950, a United States Air Force C-54 Skymaster lifted off from Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, bound for Great Falls, Montana. 44 people were aboard, mostly servicemen, along with a civilian technician and a young mother traveling with her toddler. The flight plan followed the Northwest Staging Route, a chain of airfields stretching through the Yukon wilderness. 2 hours after departure, the pilot checked in over Snag, Yukon, reporting ice on the wings and a powerful tailwind, and that radio call was the last contact ever made. The C-54 never arrived at its next checkpoint. Within hours, search and rescue teams began mobilizing. What followed became one of the largest joint United States and Canadian search operations in peacetime history. 85 aircraft and 7,000 personnel scoured the vast expanse between Alaska and the Canadian border, covering as much as 350,000 square kilometers of snow-choked valleys and mountain passes. Searchers faced brutal winter conditions. Temperatures plunged well below zero. Blizzards swept across the region, and visibility often dropped to nothing. Planes flew grid patterns over forests and frozen rivers, while ground teams battled deep snow and treacherous terrain. The scale of the operation was immense, yet the landscape swallowed every trace. Not a single piece of wreckage was ever confirmed. False leads surfaced, including garbled radio signals, sightings of low-flying planes, and smoke on distant ridges, but each one faded under scrutiny. Theories ranged from catastrophic icing to navigational error, but with no debris field, every explanation remains unproven. The families of those lost waited for answers that never came. Decades later, the fate of the C-54 remains one of the coldest cases in North American aviation. It is a reminder of how Alaska's winter and wilderness can erase even the largest aircraft, leaving only questions behind. Joseph Balderas, a 36-year-old resident of Nome, was reported missing in late June 2016 after failing to show up for work. He was last known to be in the city near the coastline, but no precise location was ever confirmed. This missing report set off an immediate local response. Nome police and Alaska state troopers began searching within hours of the report, focusing on the tundra, shoreline, and egress routes from his vehicle. Over the next 3 days, search teams on foot, using all-terrain vehicles, and working with scent dogs covered accessible terrain. Volunteer boats were grounded by storms, and thick brush made progress slow. Despite the effort, no sign of Balderas was ever found. The search operation faced severe limits from weather and terrain. The search was suspended after 72 hours, with officials citing high risk to searchers and a lack of new evidence. Family members and local volunteers continued to comb the area, holding out hope as the days stretched on. The family response continued even after official teams stood down. The environment around Nome complicates every search. Summer can bring sudden fog, swift rivers, and a tundra that can swallow evidence in hours. In press releases, investigators reported no indications of foul play at his home. No arrests have been made, and the case remains open. The disappearance of Joseph Balderas stands as a stark reminder of how quickly a person can vanish along Alaska's coast, leaving loved ones with few answers and a landscape that rarely gives back what it takes. This vanishing is a caution about the limits of search and rescue in this region. Florence Aukpialuk's disappearance began with a single report on August 31st, 2020. She was last seen near a tent on West Beach just outside Nome. That day, the weather shifted quickly. Coastal fog rolled in and out, making visibility unpredictable. Alaska State Troopers and Nome Police coordinated a search that grew rapidly, stretching out to a 50-mile radius. Volunteers, local fire crews, and the Coast Guard joined in, scouring the tundra and shoreline for any sign of her. At times, searchers had to pause when wind and fog made the coastline impossible to navigate. Florence's family waited for news as each day passed. Relatives spoke of the anxiety of not knowing, and the constant hope for a call that never came. Community members organized vigils and posted flyers, but the only evidence found, her shoes and jacket, offered no clear direction. Officials updated the public through brief press releases, noting the expanding search area and the limits of what could be covered. Images of Florence are scarce, so her story is told through maps, timelines, and the voices of those who knew her best. The search for answers continues, shaped by the same elements that have challenged every effort: unpredictable weather, vast open land, and the weight carried by families left behind. February in Fairbanks means darkness, sub-zero air, and a silence broken only by the crunch of boots on snow. On the night of February 2nd, 2019, Shauna Oman was last seen along a rural road outside the city. The temperature hovered near -30 degrees Fahrenheit. In these conditions, even a brief delay can be deadly. By the time her absence was noticed, daylight had already faded. 5 hours of sun mark a winter's day here, and the search began under the long shadow of night. Fairbanks police and Alaska State Troopers responded quickly, organizing ground teams and calling in volunteer search and rescue. The cold battered equipment and froze batteries within minutes. Dense forest pressed in on all sides, making visibility poor even with headlamps and flashlights. Searchers fanned out, checking roadside ditches, snowbanks, and the edges of nearby woods. Every hour that passed, the odds of survival dropped, and the cold can take a life in less than an hour without shelter. Despite coordinated sweeps and community outreach, no new clues surfaced. The trail went cold before sunrise. With few witnesses on the road that night and no sign of where Shauna might have gone, the investigation stalled. Her case remains open, a stark example of how Alaska's winter can erase all traces, leaving families and searchers with nothing but questions. Portlock, also known as Port Chatham, sits on the southern edge of Alaska's Kenai Peninsula. In the early 1930s, census records show a bustling cannery town with about 200 residents, most working in fishing and logging. Property records confirm a steady presence through the 1940s, but by 1951, the community was officially abandoned. Land deeds, school enrollment logs, and tax filings all point to a slow decline, not a sudden flight. The salmon runs that once fed the local economy collapsed after World War II, and labor shortages made it harder to keep the cannery open. As jobs dried up, families moved to nearby villages or larger towns along the coast. Oral histories from Alaska. Native residents, collected between the 1930s and the 1950s, describe daily routines: netting fish, hauling timber, sharing meals in packed bunkhouses. These accounts mention hardship and isolation, but nothing out of the ordinary for remote Alaska life. No police reports, court filings, or official correspondence document any attacks or mass panic. The dramatic tales of a terrifying creature called Nantiinak in later retellings only surfaced decades after the town was empty. These stories, first published in the 1990s and spread through podcasts and blogs, describe shadowy figures and unexplained deaths. But when compared to the archival record, they stand apart, more folklore than fact. The gap between what the ledgers show and what the legends claim has made Portlock a magnet for speculation. Abandonment is clear in the paperwork, the reasons less so in popular memory. In the absence of hard evidence, myth has filled the silence left by a vanished town. The case known as Eklutna Annie stands apart. In 1980, the remains of a young woman were found near a power line outside Anchorage. Her identity remains unknown more than 4 decades later. Unlike disappearances that ask what happened, here the mystery is who she was. Investigators linked her death to serial offender Robert Hansen, who confessed to multiple murders in the Anchorage area in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Hansen was convicted, and he died in prison. The woman's name, family, and story remain out of reach. Forensic scientists have spent years working to answer that question. Early efforts relied on dental records and fingerprints, but no match surfaced in state or national databases. In recent years, the case moved into the realm of forensic genealogy. Technicians extracted DNA from bone samples, uploading genetic profiles to public databases in the hope of finding a distant relative. This process has identified other cold case victims in Alaska and across the country. It can take years or even decades. Partial matches have surfaced, suggesting distant connections, but no confirmed family has been located so far. Each new test brings a small chance of resolution. The technology is improving, and the network of available DNA grows with every new upload. For now, Eklutna Annie's real name remains unknown, a reminder that some mysteries are about identity, not just crime. The search continues, carried forward by the quiet persistence of scientists, and by the hope that somewhere a relative may finally close the gap. Alaska's missing persons crisis is shaped by more than just isolation. The state's search and rescue records show that when someone vanishes in the wilderness, the first 48 hours are critical. Nearly all recoveries happen in that window. After that, snow, ice, and tides erase tracks, and the odds of finding evidence drop sharply. In aviation cases before the 1980s, most small planes carried no emergency locator transmitters, leaving searchers to rely on last radio calls and flight plans. Even today, gaps in radar and radio coverage leave huge stretches of airspace unmonitored. Responsibility is divided across local police, Alaska state troopers, and federal agencies, but the handoff is rarely seamless. The FBI only steps in when there is a clear federal link, like interstate crime or evidence of sabotage. Otherwise, state agencies lead, often with limited resources. Search priorities shift fast. If no new leads surface, teams are pulled back, and efforts are triaged to other emergencies. Terrain compounds the problem. Dense forests, rivers, glaciers, and tundra can conceal wreckage or remains for decades. In some cases, entire aircraft are swallowed by ice or lost at sea, never to be found despite massive search operations. Official statistics confirm the pattern. More than 200 unresolved cases are listed by Alaska state troopers, with aviation accounting for 1 in 5 cases. Resource constraints, rapid weather changes, and jurisdictional lines combine to keep many mysteries unsolved, not by design, but by the limits of what is possible in a landscape that gives up little and takes back even less. Even now, more than 1,200 people remain missing in Alaska, more per capita than any other state in the United States. For every unsolved story, there are families searching, systems straining, and wilderness still undefeated. The unknown is not just history here, it is part of daily reality. In Alaska, disappearance is not rare. It is a risk that shapes each day. Share your perspective.